an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering The Wizard's Dilemma, pages 55 through 100. Note, if you are following the very helpful breakdown that was given to me by, I believe, Hugabug aka Anna, my apologies, but because I fucked up in the first episode, that is going to have a ripple effect and nothing is going to be on schedule anymore. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. First of all, many thanks to Yama for commissioning this episode. Everybody's in the chat talking about how different I look because I have contacts in and very dramatic makeup right now. And honestly, saying that I look like a different person, there cannot be any higher compliment to me. That is what I'm going for whenever I put makeup on, is to just look like somebody else. So, yay. Yeah, apologies again to those of you who had been like asking, what's the breakdown for these chapters, because they are going to be trying to read along. Like I said, I was given a breakdown by Anna via email, and the first section was supposed to only be 37 pages long, and I read just over 50 without checking this thing ahead of time, forgetting that other people were going to be following along with it. And because I overread for the first one, the second one would have been a very short section if I continued to follow it. So it says for section 2, all of Friday evening, all of Friday night. But in truth, because I read up to page 100, that is partway through Saturday morning and afternoon. And again, these chapters are not numbered. The Saturday morning and afternoon is, there are chapters called Saturday evening, Saturday afternoon and evening. It's very easy to get confused. So I'm really sorry for those of you who are trying to follow along with me if this is not, if this has not been easy for you. I did not mean to mess things up so badly. But here we are. Here I am. I have had just a solid week of fucking up. So this just feels like we're on theme. Yay. All right. So let's start talking about what the fuck happens when Kit goes through this little portal, because I started to talk about it last week and then realized that I had made this mistake. And what's interesting here is that Kit goes back to it, but he goes back feeling very anxious because even though everything wound up okay the first time, even though there was definitely a sense of that could have been really bad, and actually I wound up safe and I still had air to breathe, he feels like that was luck. It could very easily have turned out super, super badly, and he could have, either he or his dog or both of them could have wound up without oxygen, and we find out later potentially unable to even get back. And the sort of suggestion is you'd probably have been able to find a way back, but it might not have been the same way that you got there. So that is really alarming to me. I'm somebody who likes planning, and the idea that you could go through a door and then turn around and that door is gone. And the powers that be are basically like, I don't know, find a door, make a door. I don't know. It's not my problem. Can we just work together and be friends? That's all I feel like these poor wizard kids, they are just given a lot. And it doesn't feel like they have the kind of support that they should have sometimes. And I know that's part of it. That's supposed to be part of the ordeals they go through, is figuring things out for themselves. But it is just so risky. And what kills me is this whole thing about, oh, maybe you can't get back the same way, is not something that he that he figures out for himself. It's something that somebody tells him. And what could have happened what could have happened? That's just it. That should be what the name of these books are. The, oh my God, the things that could have gone wrong series. So yeah, this whole section, is his first visit. And it says that Kit, like, literally cannot tell if he's breathing. He swallows, but he isn't feeling it. So he's just sort of like not sure if his body is even there. And it says that there's this complete darkness, and that the other darknesses that he had used to be afraid of as a kid, there was a possibility of something hiding in that darkness. When you're a kid, it's about what's beyond that door, what's around that corner, what's hiding behind that piece of furniture. But in this, there is nothing. And that is the part that freaks him out so bad, to which I'm like, you think? Jesus Christ. Like, nothingness just sounds... This is something that I remember the first time I was ever exposed to the idea of being sort of suspended in nothingness was the Wrinkle in Time books, when they like use the Tesseract. And even as a little kid, I was just like, oh no, I don't think so. Thanks, I'll pass. Like, there's just this screaming rift of blank. It's not just like this here is a very calm sort of nothing, but it feels to me like you don't know if that is its natural state, if that's how it's become since you arrived, if that's how you're perceiving it. Is it trying to take from you? Because that's sort of the nature of certain types of nothingness in certain stories, is that it is a grasping, needful emptiness that wants to be filled and will take what it needs to be filled. And that can be true in these books as well, since entropy is such a like recurring concept, Yama says, the whole thing with his dog made me very uneasy. Just go to nothing. No thanks. That's just like when you put on VR glasses, you instantly go to nothing. There's no floor, no nothing. I hate it. Oh, I've never tried VR glasses. But yeah, that sounds not awesome. Honestly, though, VR glasses to me sound like a little bit of a nightmare. I've been sitting with Owen because I'm playing a lot of Animal Crossing lately. And for Owen, it's quite a boon because now he gets to play his video game without like feeling like he's neglecting me because I am just hips deep in terraforming. But I will look up and look at the screen that he's on, and it gives me such vertigo and motion sickness to just like watch, so I feel like VR would be real bad for me. So let's see. I'm trying to find the spot. Okay, here it is. Yeah. I've had enough of this. Which way is out? And then Kit realizes that Ponch is still here and he has no idea where Ponch is, and he can't just leave his dog. And he doesn't know how he can find his dog when he's in a nothing. And there's no way to see. There's no apparent ground to walk on to search for this dog. Nothing about how he knows how to be counts here for anything. So he decides to use a spell, and I really liked this. There was a spell Kit knew as well as his transit spells, so well that he didn't even bother keeping it in compacted form anymore. He could say it in one breath. It was the spell he used to make a small light for reading under the covers at night. Kit could see the spell in his mind, 59 characters in the speech, 21 syllables. Kit pronounced them clearly in his mind, and the last word that tied the knot in the spell and turned it loose. So, this is something, and I'm going to be recording on Golden Hand, like later today again, and this will come up again when I cover that, but the concept of how to cast spells in different books, I always just find riveting. Like, I love seeing authors' interpretations of how magic works. And I just cannot get over with this series how consistently engaged I am at the way these kids cast spells. And she talks about spells plenty, and it's not as if she ever does anything so completely different than other things in terms of the basics of casting a spell, except when you come to Dareen. That's a whole other thing. But I love hearing about the like compacting of spells and the being able to say it in one breath, and how many, all of this sort of thing makes it feel a lot closer to home in terms of like being able to relate it to things that we do as regular people. For example, you will start at a new job. Ooh, sorry guys, I forgot my Bluetooth speaker was on and it just shut off. When you are starting a new job, let's say you're doing something that's like in retail and you are at a cash register or something like this. You're using some machine and somebody has to show you the like 4-step process to get to the screen with this particular weird item and how to change the price on it and how to do. And when you first learn it, it is so tedious, and you're like doing that like hunt and peck thing, and the people on the other side of the register are really irritated and like kind of, you know, trying to be patient because they know, but like, oh my God. And not even 2 weeks later, you're hitting that and you don't even think about it anymore. And the idea that that would also work with spells is really cool. And it's something that like, because with Harry Potter, the focus is not so much on the magic. She never really gets into the way this would become a part of your like daily vocabulary. And Harry is he is raised in the Muggle world without knowing anything about magic until he's older. And you would think that there would come a point for him where this becomes like sort of second nature. There are some details that she'll mention, like them skipping steps that disappear in Hogwarts, stuff like that. But I just love the way that she puts these little details in about the way that magic fits into their daily lives like this, and emphasizes like how much they've learned and how far they've come. And it's just, I don't know, there's something about these like callbacks to the progress that they've made versus where they were when we first met them that makes you kind of proud. You're just like, oh, they're growing so much. Look how good they are at this. And it's like, we keep seeing that they're good at this. This keeps happening. You know, they keep being able to do shit with one swipe that it would have taken ages to do before. But it's just really fun to have it specifically pointed out. So anyway, this light sort of like blooms, and he is noticing how without ground or objects, there's no depth perception. So he can't tell how far away the light is, if it's coming or going. But it does make him feel a little bit better, and he sort of clings to that. And then Kit realized he was gasping for breath. He also realized that he was able to feel himself gasping. He tried to move his arms, but it was like trying to swim in taffy. As he concentrated on that light, he thought he saw a change in it. The light's moving, but that was wrong. Something in the dark was moving in front of him. Oh no, what's that? Well, it turns out to be fucking Paunch. And Kit had been ready to throw some magic at this thing because he couldn't see. And can you imagine if he just like attacked his poor dog? Oh God, that's such a nightmare. The two of them came down hard together on blacktop. Suddenly everything seemed bright as day in the single light of the streetlight down at the end of the side street. Oh my God. I got so anxious about this because like, I'm not yelling at Kit here. It would be really easy to be like, yeah, it's your fucking dog, you idiot. Remember how you followed him in here? There is no reason to think that this is Paunch other than I guess the only things that exist in this darkness are what were just brought in, but we don't know that. So I'm not mad at Kit for just assuming the worst and being ready to protect himself, like, at all. That seems very rational to me. So Paunch is so cute. I wish that you guys could hear in the audiobook when she does Paunch's voice, because did you see it? Did you see what I found? Did you? It's so great. And Kit asks, why are you all wet? And Paunch says, it was wet there. And Kit's like, no, well, not where I was, but thank God you came back, because it's unclear to me whether or not Kit runs out of air because there's only so much air in that place, or if he begins running out of air once he starts to use the magic specifically. Because that's when he really notices it, is after he casts the light. And it could be either one. If it's about the magic usage, I don't really know what that means. But if it's about, like, maybe there's a certain amount of air that comes with him through that opening, and it's not like he doesn't see it. The way that I was thinking of it until I realized that could not be because there was no light was that he walks through an opening in the air, kind of like in the second book of The Golden Compass, where there are these, like, openings in space that they are literally cutting through and pulling open and walking through. And when they turn around, there is like a window in the air behind them that they can then climb back through. You just have to be at the exact right angle to see them, because they are 2-dimensional. They are not 3-dimensional. And I kind of had it in my head that there was just an opening behind him that he could turn around and go back through. So then when I realized, like, well, if there was street light and he isn't able to see anything, then that can't be. And then once he starts being like, how do we get out of here? I was like, oh God, yeah, he really has no idea, which is much scarier. Because I'm sure he kind of expected when he stepped through to follow Paunch that this would, like, there would be some sort of return opening behind him. So Paunch asks if they can go home, to which Kit is, like, only too glad. And when he gets home, it turns out that it's only been 15 minutes since he had left, which it felt like much longer to him. And I love how this is written. He headed to the living room and sat down by the phone. That was when the shakes hit him. He just sat there and let it happen. Not that he had much choice, and meanwhile enjoyed the wonderful normality of the living room, the slightly tacky lamps his mother refused to get rid of, the fact that the rug needed to be vacuumed. At least there was a rug and a floor it was nailed to, not that terrifying empty nothingness under his feet. I really liked this moment of the shakes after something like that is absolutely justified, and it's something that I'm not sure every author would really have given a character the time to sit with. And I also like, I want to mention this as well. I also like the details about Kit's home life. And I've said this before, but it's becoming more and more clear because we're spending more time at his house. I really feel like this author has a nice sort of instinct for making two different types of home life that are both mostly healthy, with parents that seem like supportive and like they are there for their kid, but very, very different in the way that they operate and the priorities of the parents involved. Because later on there's a mention, Kit goes out the back and he says something about how it's not as like, their yard isn't as done up as Nita's parents' yard is, because her dad takes an interest in, doing gardening and landscaping and decorating and that sort of thing. And his own father, all he wants is some place to go and sit and be in the yard. And he is not really worried about like what things look like. And it's just little things like that that make a world feel bigger and more real. It makes these kids feel like they have distinct homes, because that I feel like that can be a real pitfall if you are writing YA and you have characters that you're going to see each of their homes, it can feel sometimes like they all have the same kind of parents. That there's sort of, honestly, there's an implication to the way it can be written that just parents are all the same. And I remember, when I was reading as a kid, I had a really weird situation with my parents. And what I was reading was always this like upper middle class interpretation of what that like home life looks like. And it didn't apply to me. And it wasn't like it bothered me necessarily at the time, but I feel like reading something like this, I would have appreciated it a little bit that, he's looking at the rug and how it needs to be vacuumed. He's not living in a house where there's somebody paid to come in and do this, or where his mother is just home and able to deal with this all the time. His mom has a goddamn job. She has shit to do. His dad is the one making dinner right now. And they have their, sort of things that like sort of, what's the word? Fall through the cracks. That's just real life, baby. So anyway, he calls Tom at this point, and it's an interesting thing. Later on, Kit realizes that he's never actually asked Paunch what his name is, his like name in the speech. And Paunch is basically like, hey, you gave me the name Paunch. I'm good with Paunch. And when he says something about how like the neighbor's dog uses a name in the speech, Paunch is like, yeah, they named that dog Tinkerbell though. Like, you would use a different name too, I'm pretty sure. So Kit asks him, I need to know how they do it. And it doesn't explain at all what it is that he's even asking about. The whole thing goes in a bit of a circle, and it is really funny. Kit finally is like, all right, so your dogs turn up in the yard with weird stuff sometimes, right? And I want to know how they do it and where they go and what's going on with them. And Tom's response is simply, wizard pets, man. Who knows? They just get real weird sometimes. And when Kit asks why that is, he says the popular theory is that wizards bend the shape of certain aspects of space-time awry around them. So we're sort of the local equivalent of gravity lenses, and creatures associated with us for long periods tend to acquire some wizardly qualities themselves. Which I think seems to be a reasonable, like, there's just something about living with a person that can change your whole perception of things. And that's just as a human being who, no shade to animals, but there is something much more distinct and obvious, at least to us, about our personalities. And we cannot resist that sort of effect. And that's purely psychological. We're not even talking about like the effects of magical influence. So if he's a dog and he's around Kit doing weird shit all the time, it would make a lot of sense to me that begins to affect him. And then Kit mentions that Paunch found a place. And Tom is like, he took you there? And Kit's like, yeah. And it was really kind of freaky. Paunch got me in there, and he knew how to get out again. He got me out, in fact, because I couldn't do much of anything. And Tom's like, you interested in going back there? Because that sounds pretty interesting. And he also says, and this is fun, that maybe Paunch considers Kit part of his pack, and that's why he took Kit with him. And I thought that was adorable. Until now, to the best of my knowledge, no wizards found out exactly where the dogs go to get the things they bring back because no one's been able to go along. If you really want to follow up on this, be careful. You should treat this as an unstable world gaining. You may not be able to get back the same way you left. And then he tells Kit, I don't think you should involve Nita in this because she's not part of the pack, really, according to your dog, more than likely. So we don't know that she's going to be safe if she comes with you. There might be something about the relationship between you two that makes it safe for you. And then Tom says, and by the end of this section, I do not think Nita has noticed this, but I can't be sure. And I kind of try to pay attention, but I correct me if I'm wrong. Tom says Nita's assignment status has changed. It says independent assignment, indeterminate period, subject confidential. And I believe that when we go to Nita's POV, I don't feel like she has any like thoughts about this assignment. Because she's very distracted at the fact that it turns out that, spoiler alert, she was wrong and Kit was right. So I don't think that we actually know for sure what this is yet. And part of me wonders if the subject is something that's like not even quite magical. Like maybe it is about learning to work by herself, or maybe it's about, I don't know, because like what Nita is really struggling with lately is this feeling of kind of inadequacy, really, versus Kit. And I don't know what that looks like if it were to become a magical project and mission that she's on. But I feel like it would have to have something, even indirectly, to do with raising her sense of self-worth and her faith in herself. But the thing that's interesting is that, well, I guess now, I was going to say, I'm talking about raising her faith in herself, but this whole argument is due to the fact that she has so much faith in herself that it never even occurs to her that Kit could be right and she's not. But once she finds out that Kit's right, and she's already been kind of struggling in school, I guess it makes sense that would really land a blow, and then she would be struggling with self-worth from then on. So, yeah, I don't know. But we'll see. We aren't even there yet. So, Yama says she doesn't check herself in the book. Why? That makes no sense. She checks Kit, but not herself. Not yet. But Grant, like this all, reminder, all of these chapters have been taking place within the same day. So it might just be that she got a little bit distracted and she will check up on herself, and I just haven't gotten there yet. But as of right now, I don't think that she is worried about her own project, because she has thought up until the end of the section that I'm reading that she was technically still on this assignment with Kit for the purification of the water, because she is working all throughout the day until she actively checks, working under the assumption that it didn't work and that he is going to come crawling back asking her for help, that's really the thing. Apart from checking her mission because she thinks she has one, if I were her and I got in a fight with somebody about how their spell isn't going to work and they need to do it my way, and they insisted on doing it anyway without me, you better believe the first fucking thing I check when I wake up the next day is whether or not that spell worked or not. And she doesn't. It takes her a little while to think to look. And I guess it's just because she takes it so for granted that it wouldn't have worked, that she doesn't even really feel the need to check, because she's just like, I know, it's fine. It's fine. He's going to come crawling back any second. She doesn't check to see if the spell worked until after she gets the message from Kit, I'm pretty sure, where he says, if you need some time to yourself, feel free. And then she's like, this fucking guy, he's supposed to have apologized by now. How can he not have when he definitely failed? So what I'm saying is, Nita doesn't have the obsession with being right that I have. And her mother gives her further advice on worrying even less about being right. And I gotta be like, can't relate. Look, I know being right is not the most important thing. And honestly, the part of the advice that she got from her mom that hit me was, if you keep being self-righteous, it will make people even less likely to listen to you in the future. And that was the one that got me, because my obsession with being right isn't even about just the satisfaction of that. It's about, I am trying to build up cred so that the next time that we run into something like this, you will remember that I was right last time, and you will actually give my advice and opinion some weight, which you clearly did not do this time. But it never occurred to me that the attitude that you take about being right is going to make people resist either taking your advice next time or even admitting to you that you were right later. And I don't know why that never occurred to me. But so thank you, Nita's mom, for the advice. I will not listen to you about being obsessed with being right, because that's just part of me and I can't give that up. But I will try and be less fucking smug about it, because I can be so smug, you guys. I'm so sorry. I don't know, honestly, how Owen deals with me sometimes, because it must be really terrible. But anyway, so yeah, he gets a compliment from Tom about the spell with the water. And Tom tells him to let him know anything new that he finds out. If you find anything in Ponch's behavior that has to do with more normal world gating, tell the gating team in New York, though the fact that a dog's involved is probably going to make them laugh if it doesn't actually ruffle their fur. So then we go to Kit and his sister. Guys, I didn't remember that Kit had a sister, like, at all. She must have been mentioned, and it just didn't land for me. I don't know, but apologies for being very unprepared during this moment when he's like, he went to his sister's room, and I was like, he what now? So yeah, her name is Carmela, which I will never not think of Carmela from The Sopranos. And she is not a wizard, and he is very, very glad that he doesn't have to deal with the kind of Dareen-esque escapades. And it says Carmela was no more of a nuisance to Kit than she had to be at her age. She had even taken the wizardry pretty calmly for an otherwise excitable 15-year-old when Kit had told the family about it. After the shock wore off, "I always knew you were weird," had been Carmela's main response. Still, Kit kept an eye on her and always put his manual away where she wouldn't find it. The thought of her turning into an older version of Dareen terrified him. So, yeah, that, and it says his older sister, Helena, seemed safe from this fate, being too old for even late onset wizardry. Again, another sister. I'm just like, what? But she's apparently in college right now. So, yeah, she isn't probably going to factor much into this story. Kit loved her dearly, but was slightly and guiltily relieved to be seeing less of her, for she was the only member of the family who seemed to be trying to pretend that Kit's wizardry had never really happened. Which is interesting. It's always really hard for me to understand, and that's not to say I don't think that it would exist, but when there are characters who sort of don't want to believe in magic, I always find that really puzzling, because to me, I'm definitely a skeptic, not as much of one as some people, but I'm not as convinced of the existence of certain things as I used to be. But if you were performing magic in front of me and shit, I would be thrilled and so excited and just latch onto that, you know? And the idea that somebody in the family with a wizard would try and pretend it never happened, can't relate, man. Why not? I would be trying to get him to do all sorts of shit for me. Are you kidding me? I can't even think of an example, but I know that when I was in school, there would have to have been several very specific favors that I would have asked for from a sibling who could do fucking magic. Like, get out of here. Anyway, so he goes into his room and he plops down on his bed and gets his manual out. And he goes back to the messaging section to see if Nita has responded. She hasn't yet. Later on, she will have gotten the message, but she still won't respond. And when he checks her status, conditional active, independent assignment, research, subject classification withheld, period, indeterminate. And he thinks that maybe the powers are giving her a break. And I'm like, when has that ever been true? And I had not remembered either, like, so much about Kit. And that proves to me that this book is when it needs to be. His first name is Christopher. Did not remember that at all. It said after his name in the manual, adjunct talent in training. And Kit's like, what is that? And I am dying to know. Does it have to do with, like, space and tesseracts, basically? And when Kit says, are you tired? Because I am. Punch says, it's like chasing squirrels when I do what I did. I want to sleep afterward. Which is really interesting that it, like, takes energy for him. I wonder how long he can sustain it. And I wonder if Kit, because it's, you know, obviously Punch is somehow able to open up this portal. I keep calling it that, even though it doesn't quite feel right, but I guess World Gate is what Tom called it, so I guess I could go with that. If Kit comes with Punch and tells Punch, because Punch is able to create squirrels to chase later, right? Which is genius. I love that whole sequence. But if he is able to do that and create trees for them to run up and all of this, can he make air exist for Kit? Because when Kit goes back later, he brings extra air. But is it possible for Punch to make it so that that isn't necessary? Because Punch needs air to breathe, and he has seemed fine. Why does that not translate to Kit for whatever reason? And what was it that Punch was doing that Kit couldn't see? Because Kit follows him in. Punch says that it was wet in there. I assume that he, like, wanted to go for a swim this time or something. But why can Kit see the squirrels this time? And he can't see them, or he can't see what Punch is doing the previous time. There's no light of any kind, anything at all. Is it because Punch invited him. Punch said, come see what I found, or come see what I did. So that's not why. I wonder what that's about. Okay, well, anyway. And Kit asks Punch how long he's been doing that. And basically Punch, in his, like, weird indirect way, says that he started doing it when he was looking for Kit, when he started traveling all over to Ireland so often. He says right after you went the first time. And it was so sad. When Kit says, but where did you go since you didn't find me? Punch gets really defensive and says, I really tried. I missed you. You were gone too much. And I just like, oh, Punch, she's not mad at you. I feel like she's really good at making, like, the dog character feel like the really cute, anxious dog character. It's just right on point. So Kit says, so the same place we were together? We weren't there together all the time, Punch said. You're not there until you do something. Maybe that's what it means that he didn't see what Punch was doing, because Kit wasn't actually doing anything. But I didn't really know what Kit was doing when he was there in the squirrel situation either. So I don't know. So we go to Nita and her mother shopping for clothes, and there's a little moment of Nita and her mother clashing over how short Nita wants to wear her skirts. And I rather liked this because I feel like there's a lot of books where the main character, is, when it's a girl, the author is making an effort to show how sensible she is by having her be much more modest and like sort of occasionally even look down on people whose skirts are too short or whatever. Be like, oh, I don't know why people want to dress like that. She was more comfortable in jeans and a t-shirt, that kind of thing. And it's just because women who take an interest in how they look are looked down on, even though that's part of what we are supposed to do, society says. It's also, sort of looked down on. And I rather like that this conversation is Nita fighting for a shorter skirt. That her mother is like, are you lying to me about this being in fashion? Can we talk about the fact that her mother frames it that way? Her mother doesn't say, I don't care what's in fashion, you're not wearing that. Because her mother clearly understands, especially given Nita's history of being bullied and picked on. She is very aware of how important it is that Nita fit in as much as possible. And there is something about that I really feel like is A+ parenting, gives me like a real high on her mom. I just really, really appreciated that, because when parents just say, well, I don't care what such and such, you're not, I feel like so often they are not considering what that will mean for this kid socially. And they don't consider it because it's not, in their mind, ultimately very important. But like, oh my God, I wish more adults could remember what it's like to be a teen. There is nothing more important. And this shit, everything that happens to you during those periods of your life are going to stick with you so hard. So if your kid, if you don't let them just wear a skirt 3 inches shorter than what you think is appropriate, maybe that's going to be like something that they get fucking hung up on later in life. And like, I know you didn't mean it to be that. I get that you're just trying to like do what you think is probably best for them. But adults are very, very quick to like hand wave away what's important to teenagers. And it can be really frustrating to watch when you are somebody who very acutely remembers how important that kind of thing was. Like, whether or not it's actually important isn't really what's important, So anyway, I really liked the scene and Nita being like, I know I'm really not normal. Can I at least wear something that makes me feel close to normal? And that is more than anything the sentence that seems to like get to her mom. So she's allowed to get the skirt. I love too that when she says something about how like this is a little bit too daring, Nita's like, Mom, I was in Central Park dealing with dinosaurs recently. So like, honestly, the length of my skirt is kind of low down on my priorities list of things to be worried about at all. You know what? Legit. That's fair. So Nita and her mom get home and she feels the message from Kit about take some time for yourself. And Nita is really hurt by this, which I would be, honestly, also. I understand the way that Kit meant this. And this is one of the terrible things about like texting as well. And I think a lot of us have had this happen regarding friends in comment sections where we will know someone in person and we will know their personality and know about the way they come across in texts or on Facebook versus who they are, who we've seen and met and talked to many times. And so they can come across in this way on social media or via text that is far more like, it sounds very judgmental, very abrupt. And that is you know for a fact not at all what they mean or intend. And they don't even realize that's how they're coming across. But oftentimes it's somebody older who doesn't really like understand the nuances of communication verbally, like the same way. And it can feel like when you are interacting with somebody you know well online, like you're talking to a stranger. It can be very disorienting because you're like, man, I know you and I know you're not like this, but like, I would fucking hate you. I would hate you so much if this was all of you I knew. And this moment with Kit, like, if you need some time to yourself, feel free. He is trying to give her space and be like, hey, I get if you're too angry at me to talk to me right now, and I'm trying to be respectful of that. That's what he's attempting here. But what it reads like is, whatever, you know, if you're going to be all pissy, you can just fucking hang out by yourself till you cool off, I guess. That's the way it sounds. So when Nita gets this message, she mad. And like, honestly, I get it. I would probably take it the same way were I in her shoes. And she stomps on this feeling of guilt when she thinks that maybe he's like worried to talk to her on the phone because she's a little annoyed that he didn't call first. So she just sends a reply that says, fine, and goes to the dining room and talks to her mother about being right. And I just really liked this. There's also like her mother is the one who does the accounts. And when Nita's like, you should just make him do them himself, her mom's like, oh God, no, honey. This is one of those things. I do feel like this is a legit case though. However, what it reminded me of was like sending, if you're a woman with a male partner, put your mind in that space, a male partner who doesn't cook and doesn't really, or if you grew up with a dad, if your dad went grocery shopping instead of your mom, the shit that they would come home with, do you know what I'm talking about? Because my dad, he would just bring boxes of cookies, man. My mom would maybe buy a box of cookies. She would really do that like every other grocery trip. And my dad, it was like he was a kid. When he was allowed to go grocery shopping, he was like, ho ho, guess what? And so he would come home with like this weird arrangement of stuff that doesn't necessarily really go together. There's nothing that you can like make a meal with. You're just kind of like, what were you thinking getting like 3 jars of grape jelly, but no bread? What's happening? And that's how I imagine it is with Nita's dad and the accounts. Cause her mom is like, it took me almost a full year to fix what he fucked up. So yeah, but it's, you know, sometimes I think guys will purposely fuck up like grocery shopping so that you don't ask them to do it again. But it's very clear that her dad is very serious about not being good at this. And it's also mentioned that he talks to Nita a couple times about the importance of like math as a subject for her. And she starts to realize he can't do math well. And so that's probably why he's so preoccupied with it. And I liked that as a little character detail, you know? So her mother, yeah, she tells her, I know that a lot of things look like life and death at your age. And look, I am not trying to be like, it's not that important, because I know you guys have literally been in life and death situations. So don't think that I'm being patronizing. But, and I loved how she described this. She's like, imagine on a chart, the difference when your chart is only 1 page long and you plot like the intensity of an event, how much more dramatic that's going to look on paper with 1 page versus on a chart with 4 pages or 5. And that is exactly right. And I think that's such a good way to say that. And if I ever like talk to a kid about the proportion of stuff, I'm probably going to borrow this explanation, because it's a way of giving a kid perspective without belittling them. And that's a very, very fine line that if I engage with kids, I never want it to feel like I'm making their issues small. But I do want them to know that there is going to be a time where it will be adjusted down in terms of importance for them, and they will feel better about it because of that. Not that this, like, we're not going to talk about this or deal with this because eventually it won't matter, but more, I hope that it is reassuring to you to know that this won't always seem like the kind of crisis that it does. So she tells Nita that even if she is absolutely right and the other person is absolutely wrong, it's just easier to apologize right away. And I really, like I said, I'm not going to take the advice, but like, it's legit advice, I guess, if you want to live your life that way. So this is when she starts thinking about the water spell, and she goes and looks at the description of how it worked and realizes she was super duper wrong, and that shit works really well. And it's this awful, like, wave of embarrassment followed by an immediate and very admirable urge to get in touch with Kit. And I am saying very admirable because if you are a petty bitch like myself, and you get into this kind of argument, and then you find out that you were in fact wrong, there is going to be a huge, very difficult to fight impulse to not talk to that person for a bit because you don't want to admit that you were mistaken. And she does not have that at all. She immediately is like, oh God, I gotta call him. No, I'm going to write to him in the book. That'll be faster. Like, it's not any obstacle between her and apologizing is getting shoved out of the way. And she is going to do this now. And I just really, that is some maturity. And I liked it because most of the time when I realize that I'm really wrong, most of the time it's about an issue that's big enough and like dramatic enough that I also react with like immediately wanting to be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. But not always, and not as a kid necessarily, So she good. That's what I'm saying. Okay, yeah. And that she tries to send the message, and I'm a little ahead of myself here, but when she tries to send the message that she wants to talk to Kit, it won't go through. And this seems to be the very first time that has ever happened. The book has always been able to find where he is. And for some reason, it can't right now. And she is immediately very, very concerned about this. And she goes and speaks to Darine. And I finished reading at the spot where Darine like boots up her little computer that talks without any vowels. Can we talk about the fact that there are no vowels in there? Did this author invent the Tumblrification of names on the internet? You know how that's a thing? I mean, I guess that she included this for the computer because that was already a thing, like subtracting vowels. But I just think that is it's a really wild thing to read on the page from a book that is this old. And it works really, really well. And the audiobooks, guys, I cannot emphasize enough how much this audiobook narrator does with these little moments. And when she is like doing the voice of the little computer, it was amazing. It was so weird, and you immediately like got the sense of what she was doing. Highly recommended if you don't already have the audiobooks for these. But yeah, so, and when she tells Darine that she can't find him, Darine is like extremely worried also because she has never ever heard of that happening. She even says something to Nita about like maybe there's some sort of a glitch in your book, and Nita's like, a glitch? Has your computer ever had a glitch? And Darine's response is no, and I have to admit, if it did, that would be a real red flag. I would be hugely worried about that. So, all right. but let's bounce back to Kit, because he is going to follow Paunch, and he creates, or doesn't create, but he finds and puts together some spells for holding air in place, and also one for him to be sort of tethered to Paunch. And he calls it the leash spell, which it's great. It's great. I really liked this. So Kit says this is a beta class short-term interlocution. He pronounced the first few sentences, and the spell started to build itself in the air in front of him. A twining and growing chain of light, word linking to word in a structure, like a chain of DNA, but with 3 main strands instead of 2. After a couple of minutes, he was finished and the structure nearly complete. Kit plucked it out of the air, tested it between his hands. It looked faintly golden and felt at least as strong as a steel chain, though in his hands it was as light and fine as so much spun silk. And I really, really love that he has to ask his dog's, spirit name, really, because it needs to be included in the spell. And that's the only reason that, he thinks of it even now. And he's embarrassed at the fact that he has never asked. So as Paunch watched, Kit pronounced the 15 or 16 syllables of the speech that wound themselves into the visible version of Paunch's name, containing details like his age and his breed, itself a tightly braided set of links with about 10 strands involved. And then there's this little collar, and he loops it over Paunch's head, and the one that's got his name goes around his wrist. It's so neat. It's a little leash spell. So this is he's standing there. It's still pretty dark, but there's a little bit of light, and it's the kind of thing where he's not even sure if that's true or if he's imagining that. Do you guys ever have that be out in someplace really dark, and you have, people, there's a turn of phrase, the light's playing tricks, and that's exactly what it feels like. When I take walks at night, sometimes there are occasions when some of the streetlights, they go on and off because the wiring isn't stable. And so I'll have my eyes flooded with light, but then it suddenly goes away, and you'll have those marks from the light imprinted on your eyes, and you'll look around and think that there's something there that isn't, or you'll miss something that's there that doesn't look like it is. And, this moment for me, I just was able to picture so clearly that kind of blinking and squinting, is that anything? And Kit asks Paunch, what do we do? And Paunch says, be somewhere. And Kit's all right, where? And Paunch says, here. And then comes the squirrel. And what this clearly is Paunch making a little paradise for himself, and has all of these squirrels that he can chase that have trees to run up. So it's a little bit more of a challenge. He can catch them, and he says that he'll sort of shake it around, but then he starts to feel bad for them and lets them go. And it says, let's see, as Kit watched, the squirrel just made it up to the trunk of the tree. Paunch danced briefly around on his hind legs, barking his head off, and then spotted another squirrel and went off after that one instead. And Kit compares it to a dog version of a computer game, which I really, really liked that, because, he's saying at first that it's dog heaven, but when he realizes that Paunch can't necessarily catch the squirrels right away, that isn't exactly instant wish fulfillment. To me, not having instant wish fulfillment would be heaven anyway. But I can see why for some people the idea of never having to work for a thing again is very appealing. So yeah, this is just a really adorable little scene. All of the grass is very distinct and completely imagined, and he just keeps being more and more impressed with what Paunch is able to do. And Punch comes back to him. Isn't it great? Do you like it? Do you want to chase him? I can make some more for you if you... Oh, Punch, you're so adorable. So Kit says, how did you do all of this? And basically what Punch's response is, well, I wanted it. And Kit's like, no, but like the action of it. How did you do it? And Punch says, I wanted it. And Kit realizes that he means wanted in a much more active sense. He willed it into being, which is, it's such an instinctive way to use magic. It makes sense that an animal, there's no spell work involved. There's no building of a concept, an idea with rules around it. It's a very direct, I want the thing and here it is. And Punch also made it so that Kit doesn't have to use a speech in here. He can speak English and Punch still understands what he's saying, which is the best. So, yeah, I think I've covered everything. They got it working without me. He was right. I was wrong. I am so stupid. What an utter dork I've been. Which I pretty much talked about. So, yeah, I'm over time a little bit. Apologies, guys. Squirrel Land is the most wholesome thing ever, says Yama. Yes, it is adorable, and it's something that I would love to watch in a movie, like just a moment of pure joy like that. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with me. I'm going to be covering The Magicians. Well, I won't actually be covering it. The next recording is going to be a live watch of the season 4 finale of The Magicians. So if you guys want to hang out with me for that, I'm really looking forward to it. Should have made some popcorn or something. So, all right, guys, thank you again. And I will be seeing you again soon with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.